Now, there's a couple things I know about Ben, too. He lived in my home state of California, bonus points, where he got re-engaged with a spiritual journey, much like us. You know, we leave and then find our way back and get back into it. He's an excellent teacher and speaker, and his first book is out. Now, don't take this title literally. He doesn't mean for you to leave the Center for Spiritual Oneness. That's not that kind of church freak. And we're still trying to get him to do a class with us, work out that schedule. Ben, do you have a message for us today?
I do. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me back. It's always a pleasure to be with you. There are some of you that I haven't seen before, so in addition to what was shared, I just want to share a little bit more about me. I was raised in unity, so I started out in this philosophy when I was about 3 years old. I went through it for many years until I was about 8, and then decided that spirituality was BS and I didn't want anything to do with any of it at all ever again, and consequently life went steadily downhill. Until in California, out of a life that wasn't working, I got back into my spiritual practice through Centers for Spiritual Living. I'm a licensed practitioner through them, which is like a spiritual counselor. I have a master's degree in spiritual psychology. As was mentioned, I released this book last year, Church-Free Spirituality, How to Craft a Spiritual Practice Beyond the Bounds of Religion. I've got copies to sell and sign after service as well. And if you already have the book and would be willing to go on Amazon to rate and review, that would be delightful. Many of you know my wife, Sherry. She usually comes and sings with me, but she is singing at Unity in Southeast today. And so for those of you who know her and miss her, she sends her love. And before we jump in to the talk today, I've got one more big fun thing to share with you guys. Who is familiar with the Parliament of World Religions? Has anybody heard of that? Yeah? So for those of you who don't know, the Parliament is the largest interfaith gathering that happens on the planet. It happens once every 3 years. It's been described as diversity on steroids. And this year, it's in Toronto, Canada in November. And as part of our awareness around that, my wife decided to submit a proposal to do an hour-long operatic performance at the Parliament, and it was accepted. So her performance is going to be, the first half is The Diary of Anne Frank, a 30-minute version of that one-woman opera, and the second being the Mirabai songs. Now, we all know who Anne Frank is, but Mirabai was a young Hindu woman back in the day when if you were a young married woman and your husband died, you were to throw yourself on his funeral pyre, and she didn't think that was a very good idea. So she said, no thank you, I'm married to Krishna now, which is the Christ of India, and she went off, left her family, left everybody, and wrote love poems to Krishna. She is the first female poet recognized in the Hindu tradition, and her poetry has been set to music. So that's going to be the second half of the performance. And we want to take you guys with us. Now, we of course can't take you physically, but we want to take you digitally. So I will be there with Sherry. We're going to be doing as much Facebook Living as we can, as much video presentation as we can. I'm going to try to interview as many people of different faiths as I can. But in order to get that information to you guys, we need to be able to connect. So I've got, with my books, an email sign-up sheet. So if you're willing to give us your email address so that we can make sure you know when we're going to be on Facebook Live and where to get those videos, we'd love to share that experience with you because it is such a wonderful opportunity to experience the diversity of interfaith around the planet. So that's a very exciting thing, and we are happy to share that with you guys as we can. So, on with the talk for today. The waiting is the hardest part, is what we're talking about today. One of the things that we come to when we engage in new thought is this idea of being able to co-create with Spirit. That we can use these ideas, these principles and practices to get stuff and things and experiences. It often starts out with parking places, right? You can manifest a parking place. Is anybody good at that? Yeah? It's kind of fun. I manifest a parking place every time I lead it. I lead it and I manifest one for somebody else, right? So I'm constantly manifesting parking places in that way. But one of the things that happens when we start in this process is that there comes a point when we have to wait, right? With any form of creation, whenever we're seeking to birth anything, there's a gestation process. There's that time where things are coming together, where the cosmic tumblers are falling into place so that our experience can come to fruition. And oftentimes, it can be very easy when we're in that waiting phase, when we've done all of the physical world stuff that we think we can do, to think that we just have to wait and do nothing. And then get frustrated because there's nothing that we can do to help bring our vision about. And that frustration, friends, actually helps to hold off the manifestation of our desires. So while there is a time of waiting, there is not ever a time when we have to do nothing. And so what I want to talk about today are some of the things that we can do in that waiting time so that we feel active and engaged in the creation of our life and our dreams and our desires. Now the first thing, that waiting that happens after we've had our vision and started to create it, there's also a waiting that's a pretty hard part to do at the very beginning. What often happens is we get this idea of a wonderful new thing we want to create or we want to experience and jump right into the process, trying to get it, trying to find it, trying to make it happen. And we don't take that time to wait and get a clear vision of really what it is that we want. Many years ago when we were planning our wedding, we knew we were going to get married, we knew we had a timeline, we knew we had all these physical restrictions, and we had time and money and things like that. And we had a very vague idea of what we wanted to do. And so we jumped right in, trying to fit that vague, unclear idea into restrictions that we perceived to be in the way. And consequently, it was terrible. We spent 3 hours one night looking at paper plates online. And decided at the end of that night that we were either going to have the wedding we wanted or cancel it and elope because it was not worth the stress of trying to jam it in. And we realized that we hadn't actually started at the beginning. We hadn't waited until we were clear on our vision so that we knew what we were going for. So we stepped back, we waited. We discussed our vision. We looked at it not in consideration of the financial restrictions that we thought we had, but what is the vision that we wanted to create regardless of the perceived restrictions that we had. After doing that work and re-engaging, a seemingly miraculous series of events happened. And we ended up with a wedding that in typical physical world ideas would have cost at least 4 times what it did. And it came in right at budget. Because we let go of those physical world restrictions. We took the time to wait and get clear on our vision so that we could then create more powerfully. So that's the first waiting is the hardest part. When we often forget is to wait at the beginning until we have a clear vision that we can then go into the physical world and into our inner world to create and to bring forth. Once we have that clear vision, there are internal and external actions that we need to take, right? It's Unity's basic principle number 5. Knowing these ideas is not enough. We have to have action in them. In spiritual Centers for Spiritual Living, their affirmative prayer process is called treatment. And they say, treat and then move your feet. You don't just pray about something and then sit and wait for it to happen. You don't just look at a picture of a mansion for 20 minutes a day and expect your house to miraculously transform into a mansion, right? There are things that we have to do in the physical world. Some of these are easy, right? Like if we're wanting to manifest a new car, we go and test drive cars. Even if we don't know what car we want or how we're going to pay for it, we engage physically in the process. So we do those physical world things, and then we come to the point where we've done all of the physical world actions that we can think of to do, and then we're in that waiting phase. And so what do? Well, friends, we visualize. Now, visualizing should happen the entire time, right? From the beginning in the physical world activity, and then when we're in the waiting time, take those moments to sit and go within and to vision what it's like to have that experience, to feel what it would be like as if it were currently present. Now, we talk about visualization a lot in New Thought, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time there other than to say, when you have that first inkling of, here's this thing I want to do, and I can't think of anything else that I can do in the physical world to create it, I'm waiting and there's nothing to do, visualize. That's the first thing. Take that 5 minutes, take that 2 minutes, whatever it is. Visualize, feel it. Bring it into your body, bring it into your experience that way. Now after we've done that visualizing, right? Okay, now great. I'm still waiting. There's still nothing for me to do. I visualized for 5 minutes, and I can do 5 minutes more, I guess. But then what? I can't visualize all day. Well, a wonderful thing that we can do is to take an internal inventory. Where are there beliefs in our consciousness that are blocking our experience of this? Where are there judgments, doubts, fears that are coming up? What is it, if I'm going for a specific experience or a specific demonstration of wealth or a thing like a car or whatever it might be, What are the beliefs that I have in my consciousness about other people that have that experience? Do I have any negative assumptions about those people? There was a study that was put out a while back that said that the more expensive of a car you drive, the more likely you are to be a bad and arrogant driver. I forget exactly who put it out, but it was published, and I thought this is just a wonderful opportunity for everybody to shoot themselves in the foot on manifesting something rich and delightful. Because obviously, if it's scientifically proven that people who drive really nice cars drive like jerks, and I don't want to drive like a jerk, then I can't have that really nice car, right? So we need to look for these ideas, see what it is in our consciousness that is holding us back. Another part of this internal inventory, but a very powerful part of it, is looking for incomplete cycles of action. What do I mean by that? So maybe there was a book that you wanted to read, right? So you pulled the book off the bookshelf, you started reading it, you read a few chapters, you set it down on your nightstand, intending to read it more later, and then you just got busy and you didn't, and it's still sitting there, and every time you pass by, it's like, oh, there's that book I wanted to read. Yeah, I need to read that. And then you don't do it. And then it sits there, and you see it, and you're reminded of it, and you don't do it. Maybe it's cleaning out a closet, cleaning out the garage, some project that you started to do, but never quite complete. These incomplete cycles of action really stack up over time, and they take our mental energy, they take our emotional energy, and they take our creative energy. Think about it. Every time you walk past that nightstand, you go, oh yeah, I was supposed to read that book. I should really do that. And it draws your energy, it draws your mental energy, it draws your physical energy, takes it away, leaking it out bit by bit by bit. And so when we're in the process of creating something new, when there's a new thing we want to experience, if we take the time to stop and look for these incomplete cycles of action and then complete them, we will free up that mental, emotional, and physical energy to be able to engage more deeply in creating the things that we want now. Another wonderful piece of this is that there's a reason that we haven't done those things. We haven't completed those incomplete cycles of action, right? They're not as enticing to us to spend our time on it. We know we need to do it, but if we put it in the context of, this is something that I can do to help create the vision that I'm seeking, then this thing now becomes more enticing, it becomes more important, it becomes more engaging. And so it's easier for us to then go either finish the book or take the bookmark out, close it, and say, I am done with this book, and claim it done and put it back on the shelf. You can always go back to it later. If it's cleaning out the closet, either finish the project or simply put things away and say, I call this project complete for now. Call it done. Finish it in our consciousness. There's Sherry did give me the permission to share this with you, but when we were working towards her proposal to the problem, and a lot of other creative things, a lot of other changes happening in life, she did this internal inventory, and she looked at where are there incomplete cycles of action in my own life that are preventing me from really being present in the creative process. She realized that there was a relationship from about a year back that was in flux. It was not clear if this relationship with a very important person in our lives was going to continue or not. It had kind of fallen apart and was just sort of languishing there in the background, the constant nag on her emotional, creative, and physical energy. What's going to happen? What do I do? What do I do? What should I do? Should I wait longer? Should I reach out? How do I best resolve this issue with this relationship? It's pulling a lot of energy. So she decided that it was time to finish it, right? Now there was either one or two things going to happen. It was either going to heal the relationship or the relationship was going to go away. One of the reasons she wasn't putting a lot of energy into having the conversation is because we really didn't want the relationship to go away, right? Knowing that that was a possibility. However, these other things were important. Singing at the Parliament was very important. All of the creative things that were happening in life was really important. And resolving this relationship was really important. So she did the internal work to be ready to have those conversations. She had the conversations. The relationship ended and went away. But that freed up so much energy, so much of her mental and emotional energy. And now, we've got to produce a concert that's happening in Canada. We've got to find musicians, we've got to find a way to pay for this stuff, we've got to get airfare, we've got to pay for musicians to get there, we've got to pay for their registration, we've got to find rehearsal time, we've got to do all of this stuff. right? So we need this extra creative and emotional capacity to be able to put into making this happen. And it was not too long after clearing up that relationship that the word came through, that the Parliament had accepted the proposal. So after we do our work in the physical world, after we say, I've got nothing to do, I'm just waiting, so let me visualize, we can then do this internal inventory. What are my beliefs that are keeping me from my experience of this world? Where are the incomplete cycles of action that are holding me back, that are taking my energy, that I can complete in the context of this new thing that I'm wanting to experience, this new delightful, wonderful, enjoyable thing, so that I can have that extra energy, that extra creativity, that extra emotional capacity to create powerfully what I'm seeking to do now, not what I started in the past and no longer has meaning for me, no longer has meaning. Another wonderful thing that we talk about in New Thought on the co-creation of our desires is that we should act as if, right? Act as if and it shall be. Anybody heard that? Anybody get frustrated when they hear that? Like sometimes it's easy, right? Again, we'll use the example of a car. I want to create a new car. Act as if, okay, well, if instead of my old car were my new car, what kind of swagger would I have as I walk up to my new car, right? And I'm going to swagger up to my old car like it was my new car. How am I going to sit in that fancy new car? Well, let me get in my old car and sit that way and feel that way. Many years ago when I was working on releasing my 1995 two-door Toyota Tercel with the lock punched out on the passenger side door because somebody broke into it, one of the things that I wanted in my new car was the remote keyless entry, the clicker, right? Because I would forget that I locked my door or not. And so I would be 50 feet away and have to turn around and go back to make sure I locked my door. So every time I got out of my car, I would lock the door, shut the car, walk away, and go, boop, boop. I didn't have a clicker. I was just making noise. Didn't matter how many people were around, didn't matter what parking lot I was in. I did this every time I got out of my car. I was acting as if. It also helped because I knew that if I did that, that meant that I locked my car, and so I didn't have to go back and check. But it was engaging in that acting as if, right? Easy sometimes, difficult to figure out how to do it other times, particularly if the thing that we're looking to create is something that is a huge life change, more so than just a car. What if it's this life of our dreams, this huge accomplishment in the world that we're seeking after? How can we act as if when the thing that we're wanting to create seems so far removed from where we currently find ourselves? You know, for me, I love to speak and write and teach about spirituality. Wayne Dyer did that really well. I want to do it better than him. There's a big gap between where I am now with my first book being released last November and 30 plus bestsellers, right? So how do I act as if when there is this huge gap from my current experience to where I want to be? It's a big question. I've got an answer for it. I like to call this an and so it is state. And so it is. So this is a wonderful process. It's a lot of fun. It involves other people. So this is a caution around this. We have to be sure that whoever we engage in this process understands our spirituality, loves us fully, completely supports us in manifesting our desires. Because we're going to be telling them about them. We're going to be engaging deeply with this other person in creating our life. And so they have to be able to believe in the possibility of creating that life, right? They have to love you and support you. But here's the way this and so it is date works. And I highly encourage you find a partner and do this. Pick a time. Go out for breakfast, lunch, dinner, coffee, whatever it might be. And then you set a point in the future. Today is, what, the 22nd of July, 2018. So perhaps it would be the 22nd of July, 2019. Maybe it's 6 months in the future. Maybe it's 2 years in the future. And you have that meal with that other person, having all of your conversations as if it were that distant point in the future. Now it's going to have you do a couple things, right? You're going to have to visualize. You're going to have to know what your life is going to be like a couple years in the future, that 6 months in the future. You're going to have a vision of what that is. So it engages that first step of visualization. You're then going to have to talk about it. You're going to have to get it outside of your head and out into the world. You know, I remember a year ago when I was really intending to have this one, to write my second book. And I remember sitting down and doing it and how easily it went to write that book. And then when Hay House picked it up, quicker than anything else, it was such a wonderful experience to meet all of those people. And you do these stories, you tell the stories that you would as if you were having this meal with this friend that you hadn't seen for a year, and you're sharing all of the wonderful things that have happened in that year of really successful creation of your dream. That brings it into your body. That makes it real. Another thing that's going to happen then is that other person is going to say, oh, tell me more about that. That sounds really interesting. Share more about that experience. What was that like? So they're going to then encourage you to dig even deeper into your vision, to make it even more real, to become more in depth and detailed for you. Every time I've done this with sharing, every time, I find a new avenue, a new way that I had never thought things could be possible. It might be something like, I had never thought of doing my own video podcast before, my own video blog before. But in the conversation, oh, well, tell me, how did you get there? Oh, well, I was doing this thing and I was doing that thing, and then, this video blog that I started. And wait, I had no idea that I was going to start a video blog, but because I was having this conversation, this new idea came about, this new thing that I could engage in the physical world. So you'll find new avenues through which you can take action. You'll be engaging your creative capacity. You'll be visualizing this new thing. You'll have somebody else supporting you, and then you get to do the same thing for that other person. They get to tell you about all of the wonderful successes that they have had in this imagined time frame. You get to help them dig deeper into that and share in that creative energy. Have you ever noticed how health is a big deal? Like we talked about, we can create our own health, right? And we're whole, complete, and perfect all the time. And yet, when you have a cold, have you ever noticed how it's kind of hard to know your own wholeness from the midst of a cold? Have you ever had somebody ask you to know their wholeness when they're in a cold and you feel great? It's a lot easier, right? It's easier for me to know the truth about you when I'm not in the midst of your experience that seems unlike the truth. It's the same thing with this creative process. It is so much easier for me to see the miraculousness of you, to see the divinity in you, to see all the truth about the love and the light that you are, and to know who you are in the world, to know your capacity, to know the amazing things that you can accomplish. It's easier for me to see that about you than it is to see about myself. And it's easier for other people to see that about me than it is for me to see that about myself. Right? So having somebody else engage in that way really is a wonderful way to get more creative energy. The more you give, the more you get. So as we share more about our intentions and our desires for our lives, visioning a year out in the future, 6 months in the future, whatever it might be, getting that visualization into our body, sharing out loud so we engage somebody else, and then supporting them, that entire creative capacity, that circular flow from me to them, from them to me supporting them supporting me, is an expansion of it. We get more the more we give. So it engages beyond just what we're wanting to create for ourselves. So we wait at the beginning to get our clear vision. When we're waiting, we visualize. When we're waiting, we do that internal inventory. We find our incomplete cycles of action, and we joyfully complete those to free up energy. We can engage somebody else in the co-creative process, having these and so it is conversations. And then we can let it go. Not let it go in terms of I've been trying so long and so hard to create this thing, and it obviously isn't in divine order for me to have, so I might just forget about it. Right? That's not divine order. That's an excuse for why we think we can't have something and blaming spirit for it. It's not that type of letting go, friends. It's about letting go of our attachments to how it shows up, to when it shows up. It's about letting go of the belief that we have to make it happen, that we have to be the ones to create it. It's a co-creation with spirit. We don't have to create anything. We have to have the vision. We have to show up to what's in front of us to do, to the physical world and the internal world actions. But we don't move the cosmic tumblers. Spirit does that. There's a wonderful, wonderful example of this. You can Google the video if you want to. It was an interview many years ago done with Michael Jackson. And the interviewer was asking him how he writes a song. Everybody familiar with the song Billie Jean? Yeah. So the story is of how he wrote the song Billie Jean. And he says, I don't write songs. Songs are written through me. And he tells a story about how one day he just had this idea that he'd like to write a song with a really catchy bass hook. And then he says, I just let it go. And he does this in the interview. He just has this flip of his hand, I just let it go. And then 3 days later, driving down Ventura Boulevard in Southern California, he heard the entire bass hook of Billie Jean pop into his head. He said, I want to write a song with a really catchy bass hook. And he wrote perhaps the most well-known bass hook in musical history because he let it go. He didn't let go of the desire. He didn't let go of the want. He let go of the belief that he had to do it. He didn't sit down at his keyboard or with a bass and try to pluck out every single possible combination that he could think of to create him personally this amazing bass hook. He just let it go and allow the universe to do its work. There's a wonderful, another wonderful video from one of my spiritual gurus, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Doesn't know that he's a spiritual guru, but he really is. In which he talks about the universe. And he says the most amazing thing about the universe is that you can trace all of the elements in your body back to the first stars that grew so big they exploded and shed their enriched guts all over the universe, and those created new stars and exploded, and new stars and exploded, and they can scientifically, actually, really, really, not metaphorically, trace the elements in your body back to those first stars. The universe is in us. We are in the universe. So when we take these ideas of co-creating our experience, remember, the universe is in us. Spirit is in us. There is only one presence and one power, and as we release to it, as we engage deeply with it, we can create miraculous things. Like a wedding for 25% of the cost that it would be normally. Like performing for people from all around the world, from religions across the planet. Like being here with each and every one of you as perfect expressions of the universe that you are. Getting to share in this light and this wonderful expression of spirituality that we are co-creating with each other today. Because this community, this expression of it, this Sunday, is unique. Not because you chose to make it a unique expression today, not because you intentionally created this thing and said, I'm going to show up and make this unique by doing A, B, and C, but just because you showed up as the universe, as Spirit expressing. So my friends, we can co-create the lives of our dreams. There is never a time when there is nothing for us to do, when we need to feel frustrated because we're waiting. We can actually make the waiting time some of the most enjoyable time by visualizing the experience, doing our personal inventories to clear incomplete cycles of action, having delightful conversations with people where we live our creation in the moment, by letting it go and allowing that wisdom within us to move the cosmic times so that the door unlocks in a beautiful and magnificent way that's maybe even better than we thought. Thank you so much for your time and attention. What I know about you, what I know about all of you, as the universe exists in you, is that Spirit sings your praises. That entire universe is conspiring for your highest good. And God is so thrilled to call you Little One. So we're going to move into meditation now.